What do you have to lose right now? I just think people are scared to fail.
Being able to understand what it means to have to wait, to be patient.
You're listening to the Yash and Company podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Yashanka Chalasani, otherwise known as Yash, and you are listening to the Yash and Company podcast. This is a show where we learn from the world's best 20 and 30-year-olds. By this, I'm talking about people on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, entrepreneurs, or, as we have on today's episode, one of the top 25 U.S. CrossFit athletes, Brandon Luckett. And as we always do on the show, here is a short bio about our guest, Brandon Luckett. Brandon Luckett was born in a small town outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. In high school, he was a 3-time state championship wrestler and was ranked 30th in the nation as a senior in the 160-pound classification. He graduated from LSU with a degree in physics and is currently pursuing a master's in medical physics from the University of Texas in the Texas Medical Center. His dissertation is on the commissioning of microcube thermoluminescent dosimeters for small field quality assurance in radiotherapy. Wow, that was a mouthful. And after finding CrossFit in college, Brandon competed for 3 years before being ranked 24th in the US and qualifying for the World Championship CrossFit Games in 2018, where he finished in the top 35. After finishing his master's in June of 2019 of this year, Brandon will pursue a residency at the University of Oklahoma. So before we start this episode, I have to admit that I wanted to do this recording with Brandon because I really wanted to learn about CrossFit. That's just something that I've wanted to do for such a long time. And actually, this week I took my first 2 classes, and I gotta say, it has kicked my butt. But Brandon did a great job of convincing me to try it out. But the other reason I wanted to interview Brandon was that not only is he a world caliber CrossFit athlete, he's also a medical physics grad student, and he did those at the same time. He pursued his education while competing nationally. So for me, there was just so much to get into in this episode. And so we obviously talk about CrossFit, but we also talk about how he's able to balance everything while he competed for the World Championships. And Brandon gets really raw in this episode talking about that. And that's probably one of my favorite parts of the episode. But we also talk about nutrition, biohacking, and a ton of other random things, as we always do on this show. So without further ado, here's a long-form conversation with Mr. Brandon Luckett. So this is Yash, and I am in Houston, Texas right now at the house of Brandon Luckett. Brandon, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so Brandon is someone that I reached out to a few weeks ago because a few different reasons that really stood out to me about him, but he is one of the up-and-coming stars of CrossFit, which CrossFit Games called him one of the athletes to watch. But another reason that I was just really fascinated by his story is that he's a grad student here at the Texas Medical Center. And so I'm actually here checking out medical BCM next year, have a little event to, just get to see the facility and meet classmates. So it's a fun time here in Houston. But I'm really excited because I got the chance to meet Brandon. We just had dinner, and I'm excited for this discussion. So
yeah, actually, when you reached out to me, I didn't realize how young you were, and then you're about to be a med school student yourself. So, I mean, I'm not in med school, but I am in the med center, but you're about to be a med school student. So that's really quite awesome. Congratulations, by the way. So
awesome. Thank you, Brandon. So one of the things we were talking about at dinner that I thought was really fascinating, which to me is like, oh, that's awesome. But to most people, they'd be like, what in the world? And that's this concept or this story you were sharing, how you grew up without cable. And you're a Louisiana guy, you grew up without cable, and everyone else around you is sitting here talking about LSU football, SEC, and, growing up in Alabama myself, I faced a ton of that. And similarly to you, I actually didn't have cable for a few years. And honestly, like, life goes on and it's totally normal.
Right.
But I'll let you talk about that.
I grew up in a really small town in Louisiana. It's 45 minutes away from the city of Baton Rouge. It's a town called Livonia. You would never hear about it. It's maybe 2,000 people there, 2 stoplights, a diner, a gas station, and a grocery store, and a lot of churches. And that's about all that's out there. But yeah, my dad cut off cable out probably whenever we were right in kindergarten, maybe 5 years old. He just got rid of it. Just kind of saw it as a waste of time. And whenever you're growing up where you have a 2-acre backyard, behind that is sugarcane, corn, and soybeans, and behind that is all just woods. Just there's so much to do outside. And it's actually a really cool way to grow up. We didn't spend all Saturday watching TV. We were out building forts, running around, trying not to get bitten by rattlesnakes and moccasins and things like that. So it was a cool way to grow up. Kind of being out in God's country. It was quite nice.
It's a big dichotomy from Houston, Texas, right?
Yeah, quite different. But as much as I love the growing up in the country in the middle of nowhere, I also love the energy of the city. So you kind of make the most of where you are, and so that's what we try to do.
Yeah. When I was prepping for this and got to, I follow you on Instagram, and when I was thinking of, what Brandon Luckett, Louisiana guy, what would he look like when I first meet him? I was thinking boots, I was thinking some jeans and maybe like a polo, and, here he comes in with sneakers, slim fit pants and a button up shirt. And, it wasn't what I was expecting.
I don't think I really have a style, I'm not quite hipster, and I'm not quite the country polo, a Vineyard Vine shirt or whatever, what have you. But
so you never went through a Vineyard Vines phase?
I did. I grew out of it. I don't know where.
I did too. Nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah. But I mean, that's how everyone at LSU dresses for sure. So is that a predictable stereotype? I just wasn't quite that, so it's
sure.
Okay.
It just didn't last long.
Yeah.
So one part about your childhood that's really unique is that your dad was a medical physicist, right?
Yeah.
And that's what actually you're aspiring to be,
right?
And and I'm assuming he played a huge role in your life. Can you tell us more?
Yeah. So finishing high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a profession going into undergrad, and I wanted to know. My mom's an ophthalmologist, so she's an eye surgeon. I was always, I'm going to be a doctor. That's what I want to do. But going into undergrad, I just really wasn't quite sure if that's what I was, really in the path for me. I was pretty good at math, pretty good at physics, rote memorization, not my thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a lot of what med school is about.
Yeah, it can turn that way. That's point, I guess.
At least to get through the school.
I wouldn't know yet, but
it turns into the application of what you study. But I really enjoyed the math and the physics, and my dad's a medical physicist. I never thought I would do what he did, but I remember sitting on the floor outside his office in the hallway, with my head against the wall, and like, Dad, I don't know what I want to do. And he starts talking to me about medical physics. Why don't you shadow me or whatever? I've always.
How old were you at the time?
I was 18. I in between graduating high school and hadn't started at LSU where I did my undergrad yet. Just really wasn't quite sure, and I wanted to know. I wanted a path, and that day he and I decided I'm going to major in physics. LSU actually has a option to do a concentration in medical physics, where you get to take some grad level courses, and so that was the start of what the last 6 years has been. Decided I wasn't going to wrestle in college. I had a few offers, smaller D1, D2, D3, but I knew past college it was never going to go anywhere. And I wanted to set myself up for something. And so, that day he and I decided I was going to major in physics. I actually remember all my friends from high school, telling me, she's like, dude, you're such an idiot. Physics is impossible. You can't do that. And I wasn't like a great student in high school either, so they were partially probably right. But they also didn't factor in that whenever you kind of like any of us who just you really make the decision to do something well, you can. It doesn't matter what you were before that decision. You can make the switch over to be good at something.
We have another gear in us that sometimes we don't even know about or want to tap into.
Yeah, to me, it was switching my passion for wrestling over to a passion for studying.
Let's talk about wrestling, because wrestling is a sport that requires so much discipline.
Yeah.
When I think of wrestling, I know it's hard just being on the mat, right? But there's brute strength involved, but it's also playing tennis. I know that a lot of sport is actually mental. So I know there's mental. Right. And then on top of that, you have to actually go in with a certain weight.
Right.
So there's this whole like dieting, prepping involved.
Yeah.
And now that just involved, that takes up your entire, wrestling season and maybe even the off season as well. And you're basically prepping everything that you do, everything that you eat matters when you step up on that mat.
Right.
It seems like that discipline may have factored into a lot of your success. So
yeah.
Would you say it's discipline?
Yeah. So the wrestling's like one of the greatest sports, I think. There are so many sports out there that really develop a human as not just an athlete, but like, their character. Wrestling does it as well as any of the best, because of those things you were saying. I remember being a sophomore in high school, and I was 5'11" and 130 pounds. I was skin and bones. I got pictures. I'll show you that. You're like, dude, that looks sick. Like, you don't look healthy. And I wasn't healthy, but there was a spot to fill on the lineup, and so that's what I did. But I remember mornings in high school, my mom would cook me, 1 cup of egg whites and 1 piece of whole wheat toast with some fake butter on it. And that's what I'd eat for breakfast. And she'd send me to school with a snack of a little bit of brown rice and some chicken breast, and then another snack of a little bit more brown rice and chicken breast.
It's the MD in her. She's just trying to be quote unquote healthy, right?
Yeah. And then, dinner, she would portion out my food. And that's where I kind of started learning about how to like really control what I did through how my body performed through nutrition. Because before that, it was all crash dieting. I would, this was as a sophomore. As a freshman, I wrestled 119 pounds. So, 10 pounds lighter or so. But that year, I would eat whatever I wanted during the week, get, 3 weeks before weigh-in, and I would cut water. And then I would balloon back up. We call it the yo-yo diet because your weight's going up and down like a yo-yo. And that's so bad for you. My performance was crap. I felt terrible all the time. I was angry all the time. But when my mom kind of showed me how to control my weight through like a healthy diet and a consistent energy, my performance was much better. I felt better, and it made life easier.
Yeah. You're saying 130 pounds and skinny. That reminds me of my cross country days.
Yeah.
I have to agree that, at sport, when we talk about sport, why do we do sport, right? And my sister is, she's in middle school right now, and she's playing tennis. And, when I think of why she's playing and why I encourage her to play, it's not because, and why I played, it's not because of the physical aspect. It's because there's so much more. And that is going to transcend the sport. And I think, even like you, I think we'll talk about this in a second, but all those, factors and things that you learned through wrestling, transfer over, right?
Yeah. I think sports for young kids, it's a fun way to teach character. It's much easier than putting a book in front of them, putting them on a couch and saying, you got to read these chapters and, repeat it back. No, we're going to bring you to a court, and we're going to put a ball and a racket in your hands, and you're going to learn how to be dedicated to something for 2 hours, 5 days a week with a coach who's giving you advice, and you're taking the advice and you're learning and you're developing communication skills, dedication, sacrifice, because you're not out playing with your friends or whatever. It teaches a lot, any sport.
So when you're at the CrossFit Games and you're looking at you're surrounded by some of the best athletes in the world at this sport. Is there any 1 or 2 sports that they have in common when they were children?
Yeah, there's several wrestlers throughout there. Jared Enderton was a wrestler. Alex Anderson was a wrestler. Then there was Chris Spieler was a wrestler. So that's 4 wrestlers right there, and I believe some of them were even collegiate wrestlers. Chandler Smith was a wrestler at Navy, great CrossFit athlete, and a great human. So wrestling was a big one, and then also football.
I figured football would definitely be on that list.
I think
brute strength.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys who are good at football are just freak athletes. Because to be good at football, you got to be a freak athlete.
Right.
And so,
no cross country.
There's some. Sam Quant.
Oh, really? I was just joking around about it. But
Sam Quant actually, he was like 21 years old. Won like his first event. He won double DT at the games in like 2015 or 16 or something. And he was a cross country runner through high school, and then just got like jacked and huge. And
so you're trying to tell me there's some hope for me, huh?
Dude, there's hope for sure.
I love that. So you go to college at LSU, and that's when you're studying physics. And would you describe yourself as someone who just was focused heavily on school in undergrad?
Yes.
Is that because you felt like maybe you had some pressure in you now because you kind of figured out what you were kind of interested in and wanted to follow in your dad's footsteps?
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of if you circle back to wrestling, if you look at my daily schedule, like during season, I would wake up at 5. I would go run before going to school. I'd come home. I'd pack my own lunch, which I started cooking my own meals in high school. I don't remember when, but I started cooking my own meals, just making sure that my own diet was controlled. I'd come home, pack my lunch, walk to school, go to wrestling practice after school, which was, 2.5 hour practice, grueling practices, often in like, full sweats just to kind of keep my weight down. And I'd go home. My dad would sit in my F-150 and I would push it probably like 300 meters down the street and back.
This is when you were in high school?
When I was in high school.
Wow.
If it wasn't that, I was doing, calisthenics in my backyard.
So you were basically a CrossFit athlete before you even did CrossFit.
A little bit. Yeah. Like I said, wrestling blends in so many aspects of an athlete. You got to have good endurance. You got to be able to go for 6 minutes. You got to be flexible. You got to be athletic. You got to be powerful. You got to be fast. It's a lot of things. And so I was trying to train those things then. I just wasn't big. I wouldn't call myself big now, but I'm 40 pounds heavier than I was in high school. But, yeah, so I had that attitude towards wrestling in high school, and I completely did my best to push that into school in college. So it was very similar aspect towards school. Every night I was doing some sort of homework or studying. On Saturdays and Sundays, definitely Sundays, every now and a Saturday I would take off. But every Sunday I was studying all day in something. There was actually like one of the first football games that was a home game at LSU my freshman year. I was taking like a pretty rough physics class, and I had a bunch of homework due. Not that it wasn't the roughest class. It was an intro class, I'm a freshman, but I had a ton of homework due. And it's the first home game of LSU, and my now fiance, my girlfriend then, and like some of her friends and my friends from high school, like we're all meeting up at her apartment off campus, and like we're going to walk over and go tailgating for the day and like, enjoy ourselves. And we're walking onto campus, and that in the back of my head, and she's like, I have homework. I've got to get that done. And I'll do it tomorrow. And then, we get onto campus, and like I look over to my girlfriend, I'm like, I got to go back.
Yeah.
I went back home, drove back to my house, did like 2 or 3 hours of homework, drove back to her apartment and walked over to campus and like met up with them. But like I had to get something done. I had to do something that day that would further me into, being successful in that semester.
Yeah.
So it was, in wrestling, I was always doing something to make myself a little bit better. And so I tried to do that in school and always think about how I could be a better student.
Right. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times in college I have faced the exact same situation where, there's just, call it what you want, your unconscious or your subconscious, whatever it is, it eats you up because you know what the right thing to do is right now. And you know that you go to the game and that'll bring you some short-term happiness, but the long-term happiness is going to come from knowing that you secured what you needed to get done at that moment. Right. So
I call it a fear of failure, which is a huge driving force for me.
Yeah. When did that start for you? Was it when you started, doing...
Is in wrestling, I think.
Yeah.
It's actually my sophomore year, the first year I ever started. There was a deal with one of my really good friends in high school who was a year ahead of me. We were both wrestling for the same weight class, but he had all the experience. He had been there since 8th grade, had been wrestling, had done his time. And it was a thing where we were both very evenly matched. Both very good wrestlers, and we do this thing where we call it wrestle off. The best 2 out of 3 in a match would be the one who started. And so somewhere down the line in the season, I had been starting, broke my wrist, came back, and then we had 2 wrestle offs, and where we had them scheduled, and I had this idea in my head, I'm just going to give him the starting spot. He earns it. He's been wrestling all season since I've been out with a broken wrist. He deserves it. I'm not wrestling off, he's going to have the starting position. And my dad, he heard about that. He's like, no, that's bullshit. You're wrestling off. Like, whoever wins is like, whoever deserves it is the one who gets it. Whoever wins is the one who deserves it. And I think that was really kind of a defining moment in my character, in the work I had been doing all that year. I deserved to, the best man deserved to get it. Not just the one who was older, the one who'd been there longer, is the one who put in the most work and came out victorious. And so from that turn on, I believed in working harder than everyone around you. And so, long story short, that's kind of the time period in my life. It was induced by my dad, because I didn't want to let him down. He said, no, you're going to fight for that position. And I didn't want to let him down. And yeah.
Yeah, I love hearing about stories like that, because it's those little moments that end up shaping your entire life, right? Because you always look back to that one thing that you did and saying, if I can do that, I can also do the rest.
Right.
So when did CrossFit, you're in college now, you're majoring in medical physics. When did CrossFit get in the middle of all this?
Pretty much right after high school. Anything my brother's ever done, I've tried to do. He started football in middle school. I started football. He started wrestling in middle school. I started wrestling. After high school, he was already doing CrossFit with a roommate of his in college. And he's like, dude, you got to try this. You'd love it. So I started doing CrossFit just like him. So I started that probably before I even started undergrad. Just because I needed something physical to push myself in. I'd been doing it for so long with wrestling. I was like, I need another push, not just the mental side of school that I know I'm getting into. I need something physical to do. And so that's whenever I got started into CrossFit. And it wasn't really that competitive then. I was competitive in my community, in the classes and the class workouts or whatever, but I wasn't competitive outside of our gym. And then about a year later, it started getting competitive, and then I started kind of taking it serious probably 3 years after starting.
And that's when CrossFit starts growing too, right? So it seems like you kind of came in at a really good time.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't take too long off of sports, and get super out of shape. I had good conditioning. There was a lot of strength that had to be built, but I had the work ethic, and I had the endurance, or I guess the base, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, from wrestling,
right?
Take it, yeah. So if someone doesn't know what CrossFit actually is, how would you describe it?
So if you think of if I see someone in public and I know they don't really care what CrossFit is, but they want to know, I'm like, think about a decathlon. There's 10 different events that one person competes in. They're looking for the best athlete, throwing, jumping, sprinting, long distance, middle distance. With CrossFit, it's every single modality of fitness that you can imagine. We try to do it. So, gymnastics, whether it be walking in your hands or, pull-ups, muscle-ups, any of that kind of thing, swimming, running, biking, rowing, whether it be in a real boat, like a collegiate rowing, or on the indoor. And then it goes into even weightlifting, whether it be powerlifting or Olympic lifting. And so you take all of these modalities of fitness and do as much of it as possible and get as good at as much of it as possible. And it also needs to be measurable, right? So just like the mile, you have a time and the fastest man wins, or any race. In weightlifting, it's the man who lifts the heaviest. In CrossFit, the workouts need to be measurable. So we call that, you give a time domain and you try to do as much of the workout as possible, or you give a set workout with set reps and weights and you try to do it as fast as possible. So that's kind of CrossFit in a nutshell.
Sure. So, I think when you're talking about, at least something that I've noticed is that when people go to college, they don't play any sports anymore typically, and they instantly go to the gym, start working out. And I went through this too. I ran cross country, played tennis, and it's a lot of cardio. And I'm like, I'm gonna put on some muscle. I want to look good. I want to look the way I finally thought I should look like.
Right.
And it's fun. It's fun for a little bit. But then you realize there's more to fitness than all this time I'm wasting just to look good.
Sure.
Right. And I can do that in so many other ways. And honestly, like I've actually transitioned more from trying to look good to more of this understanding of my fitness as wellness. Right. It's like this concept of being fit, not just physically, but also through flexibility.
Yep.
And so, when I think of CrossFit, there's a few things that, that I and maybe some other people as well that, they raise some cautions, right? So one thing they'll say is you're doing all these crazy things. So you're going to get injured. Like, I don't want to get myself into an injury prone sport. And I'll tell you myself, like I have really bad mobility. It's something I've worked on, after, realizing that, I need to start watching out for this or otherwise I'm going to be like 80 years old and breaking all sorts of things. And so, and it's something that's improved, but, it's still not to the point where, you're doing a snatch overhead and, I don't think my shoulders could go that far right now. And so, when people tell you that, this is an injury prone sport or they don't have the mobility for it, what do you say?
So usually I'll tell them I had more injuries in wrestling, a torn rotator cuff, broken wrist, broken arm, pulled multiple muscles in my back. Let's see, recently I've got this Achilles issue going on, and it's because I've been running a lot. Well, not from CrossFit. Everyone runs, I've been injured from things not doing. I've never been injured doing a snatch or a clean and jerk.
Why do you think that is?
Because and this is the next thing. So if you don't have the mobility, then don't throw heavy weight overhead. Start with a PVC pipe until you've built up the mobility and the strength in the ligaments and tendons in your shoulders and in your ankles and in your knees so that they can support that weight through a full range of motion. Because you can't just support them at the extremities or at their strongest point. It has to be able to support it at its weakest point as well. Right. So in the snatch, it's whenever you're all the way in the bottom of a deep squat and you're fully extended with your arms overhead and you've got a barbell over your head. Don't put a ton of weight in there until you have perfect mobility in those positions, and then you slowly start adding weight. People who get into CrossFit and get injured get way too eager and competitive with it because it is a competitive environment. You're trying to get the most reps or the fastest time or the heaviest weight. That's the nature of it, and that's how you measure fitness. People's egos get in the way, and they start putting far too much weight on the bar, or they try doing far too much volume, things like that. And so really it can be either, self-driven from ego or less likely, but also likely poor management on the coach's side. Someone who's not watching you close enough and allowing you to do movements that maybe you're not quite prepared for.
So let's just say I want to dissect into a little bit of those things that you talked about, but let's just say you are like me. Let's just say I'm just trying to get into CrossFit, which I am. I like trying all sorts of things,
right?
Whether it's diets or workouts or whatever, right? So, how long do you think it would take for someone who's a beginner to slowly start maybe like going to a workout and feeling like, oh, I'm not just here doing some stretches, trying to make sure my mobility is good, to the point where they're actually going, hey, this is a workout. I came out of here like feeling like I gave my best. Do you think that it's something that they can do
the day you start? The day you start? Yes. So a lot of people will be like, oh man, this weight's not heavy enough. The workout's too easy. Like, you put the what we call the RX weight, the prescribed weight. Let's say it's 135 pounds for clean and jerks. You put the RX weight on there, but you weren't the first person who finished the workout. Take the weight off and go faster with good range of motion, with healthy range of motion, from the ground to overhead, where your entire body's, your shoulders, your elbows, all those tendons and ligaments are supporting that weight overhead. Do it lighter and do it faster. You're going to hurt a whole hell of a lot more than doing it heavier and doing it slower. I promise. I've done workouts with zero weight, just pure body weight. And you think about running, there's no weight whenever you're running a 100-meter dash, or a 400-meter dash, whatever it is. But it hurts so bad when you run it really, really hard.
Yeah, when you do your best. Yeah.
And so when I'm talking about Olympic movements, even if the weight is light, do it well. When it goes, the where you're going to feel like you're getting the workout is what we call the metcon, the metabolic conditioning. Do it light, do it well, and do it fast, and you're going to hurt.
The next day you'll feel it.
Yes. I
So
promise.
let's go into that, because whenever I go to the gym and I hear guys talking about working out, we're talking about the bros, right?
Right.
They got a tank on, they're at the bench press, and they're trying to do as much as they can for 4 or 5, 8 to 12 reps, whatever. And they'll say, "Oh, I don't want to do CrossFit. That's crazy, because that mixes cardio and weights, and those should not go together."
Right.
And you're talking about, well, I do body weight stuff. First of all, you're freaking huge, and
I appreciate that.
yeah, and this is just guy to guy, right? Man, this is turned into bro talk right there. But you have a great physique, and you're over here saying, I do body weights and I'm getting better every day. So whenever you hear someone say, that weights and cardio shouldn't go together, what do you say?
It really depends on what your goals are in terms of fitness. If you want to be the strongest person in the gym, you want to have the biggest bench and squat and deadlift, then I don't recommend doing CrossFit. You will be very strong doing CrossFit, but if you want to be the strongest, don't do CrossFit. If you want to be the fittest person, and fitness is defined as being able to, let me see how I could define it properly, is being able to attack any challenge. So the strongest guy in the gym is not going to keep up with me on a 5K. I promise. The strongest guy in the gym is not going to keep up with me on a 5K. But I'm not the strongest guy in the gym, and I'm not the fastest guy on a 5K. If you want to be fit, you want to be good at everything and not the best at any one thing, right? And so if you want to be the strongest, don't do CrossFit. If you want to be the fastest 5K runner in your group, don't do CrossFit. If you want to be the most flexible person in the world, don't do CrossFit. But if you want to be good at all of those things, then do CrossFit. CrossFit will make you a good runner. It will make you a good lifter. It will increase your range of motion and flexibility if you practice CrossFit correctly. But you won't be the best at any one of those things. I'll tell you, whenever I started CrossFit, I was in shape. I was more of an endurance athlete, I guess. I did a lot of calisthenics. My squats gone up, close to 200 pounds. I don't even know.
How much do you squat?
Just 405. The worst.
Just 405?
Just 405. The lifting event. So there was an event at the CrossFit Games. It's called the CrossFit Total, which is a 1 rep max back squat, 1 rep max deadlift, and 1 rep max shoulder press. I didn't go for my 1 reps then because I didn't think I was. It was a play by me and my coach to not max out really, because we had a marathon row that evening, 42,000 meters. That was fun. But I didn't think the extra effort was going to get me any higher in places.
Sure.
And it was just going to ruin my central nervous system for the rest of the day. But yeah, the only reason I didn't come in last in that event was because Josh Bridges had like a hurt knee, so he couldn't squat. And then another guy missed his strict presses because of a judge's call. And so he missed, 200 plus pounds of his lift in the total. And so I came in third to last.
So what are those guys pumping? Like the top ones?
Top guys, a good squat is 450 plus. A good strict press is 200 plus, and a good deadlift is 500 plus.
Yeah. I mean, it's
And
only like 50 pounds more than you on the squat, and you're thinking, and I'm just sitting here going, that's not that much. And then you think about it, like for every 5 pounds at that point is just, that's brutal.
Well, you think about it, you're like, oh man, I got a 10-pound PR. That's huge. At that point, a 10-pound PR in any of those lifts is like enormous.
Right.
And I'd have to do that 5 more times just to get good at the squat.
Yeah. And as we continue this conversation as we end this conversation on CrossFit 101, how do you mentioned that you need to find a good coach, right?
Right.
So if I were to start CrossFit, hopefully I do, how would you recommend I go through that process?
Yeah. So
or
a lot of gyms will do like like a free trial class. Like I know CrossFit Central Houston does a free trial class where you can go in there, just observe, like run through the class. Even for beginners, I'm sure they will have some exception to that. They also do on-ramp classes where you go and you learn movement. Each movement that we would implement in a CrossFit workout, you'll go and learn. They'll teach you, go through it, make sure you can do it properly. And so through a free trial class, you can go in there, you can see their style of coaching, how their classes are run, things like that. If you feel like they're really just blazing through the movements, here's a squat, make sure you're going below parallel, and that's all the cues they give you. Where versus another gym, we're squatting, you're trying to drive the knees out. We don't want our knees tracking too far over the toes. We want them in line with the toes. You want your pelvis in a neutral position.
So they're being overcritical of all your movements.
Yeah, you need someone who's going to keep a close eye on you. And so if you can go in and just get some of those trial classes and just get a feel for how well they pay attention to their clients and their athletes, that's kind of how I would go about it.
Or you can just move to a city where there's a CrossFit Games qualifier and just ask him what's the best gym.
Houston's got a few CrossFit Games. Our gym alone, Central Houston, has 4 CrossFit Games athletes in it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I would expect that out of a city this big, right? So.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Still kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. Just low-key promotion.
yeah. CrossFit Central Houston, fam.
So when did you really take CrossFit seriously? When did you start knowing that you could actually be really, really good at this as one of the best in the world?
That's a good question. So I started taking it seriously from a training standpoint probably whenever I was a sophomore, into my sophomore year of college. So I'd been doing CrossFit for a couple years. I'd been to what we call regionals twice on a team. And then I kind of started getting better than other people in our gym. And I kept progressing. I kept getting a little stronger, kept getting a little faster. Each year in the open, I was doing a little bit better worldwide and region wide. 3 years ago, I was on a team for the last time, and I was pretty close to qualifying for regionals. And if you don't know, for CrossFit, there was a 3-step process to qualifying for the World Championships. Number 1's the Open, where it's a 5-week-long competition. It's a worldwide. You can compete against everyone who wants to. You submit scores online. If you want to get onto the next step, which is regionals, what you would do is complete the workouts and film each one of them so that if you do qualify, you submit all of your videos from your workouts so that they can be judged by CrossFit HQ. And if you qualify in your region, you go on to the regionals. And for the past couple years, the top 5 athletes at the regional competition, and there's probably 24 regions, or not, let's see, 8, there's 8 regionals. So 24 regions go on to compete in 8 regionals. And so if you qualify for the top 5, or if you finish top 5 in any of the regional competitions, you can move on to the games. And so there's team and individual competition there. And 3 years ago was the last time I competed on a team, and I was pretty close to qualifying as an individual. The next year was the first time I qualified as an individual through the Open to compete at regionals. And I was like, wow, that's been a goal for a long time. I just wanted to get to regionals that year because I thought that felt like a very difficult thing for me to attain. Only top 20 in our region went on to regionals, and then top 5 at regionals would go on to the games. And so that year, I kind of took on the challenge of going to regionals, and didn't really have a whole lot of expectations when I went in, but ended up finishing 7th place. So 2 spots out of a qualifying position. And I had no clue that I was going to be able to do that. I felt that everyone there was a much better athlete and much more capable than I was. But 7th place was pretty good. And then that following year ended up moving to Houston, Texas, where I kind of linked up with Alexis Johnson, who I'd actually trained with the summer previous because I was doing an internship in Texas. So I kind of knew her. She was a CrossFit Games athlete. I was training with her before she went to compete at her first games. And so whenever I moved to Texas, I kind of ended up at her gym, started training with her, and Travis Williams, who's another CrossFit Games athlete from Texas, who's a really good friend of Alexis. They both kind of took me under their wing, and I got to train with them a good bit, see how they did things, see how much dedication they put in to their training, and that year I really pushed a lot of chips and made a lot of sacrifices to try to go to the games because they both convinced me that I can do it. So I think 3 years ago, I kind of took it seriously. 2 years ago, after I came in 7th at regionals as an individual, the following year I took very seriously, made a lot of sacrifices to make that happen.
And you made it to the games?
And I made it to the games.
So what did you place in regionals that year?
Third. And all thanks to Travis. If Travis ever listens to this, it's all because of Travis, because he didn't compete individually that year. Thank you.
Well, that works out too.
That
you don't think about or plan for. So when you go to the games, you have some of the best athletes in the world around you that you're competing against.
Right.
One, I got to imagine that's a surreal moment.
Yeah.
And you're probably one of the youngest ones there, right? You're 23 at the time?
Yeah, there was 2 other guys who were about my age. Most people are 25, 26 or older. A lot of them had already gone through undergrad and played sports and then got into CrossFit. So there was 2 or 3 of us who were 24 years old, or I guess I was 23 at the time. Yeah, I was 23. So there's a few of us that were like 23. We looked like children next to all those men.
No, but Brandon, let's actually talk about that, because you are probably one of the quote unquote smaller. Hope you don't take that offensively. Athletes in the games, but you're also really good when it comes to endurance as well. Is that something that you kind of recognize as something that you're really strong at and focused on, or is that just the way it just kind of worked out?
So I don't really know. I don't really know what I'm good at in CrossFit. Even at the games, there was nothing that I just excelled at and did really, really well in. I certainly wasn't the strongest athlete. In the longer endurance events, I did better in, but I still didn't excel at any of them. I really think I was and still am an immature athlete and haven't really developed any huge skills. I've just been kind of good at everything. Like I was saying, in fitness, you want to be good at everything.
Sure.
I was just kind of good at all of it.
You were 23 at the time, so it's not like anyone expected you to, compete against some of these best guys. And it's interesting because I was watching a video as I prepped for this, and you actually went in with the expectation of not winning the games, and then I think your training partner or coach, he described this as, if you go into the games thinking as a first-time athlete that you're going to win it, you just have an ego, or you have something in you that is insecure, and you're just showing that as confidence.
Yeah. No one goes into the games and knows what to expect their first time, really. And that was even with my expectations to be maybe in the top 20, which I didn't achieve. I went in just so raw. I didn't know what the hell I was really doing. I'd competed for so long in CrossFit, but the games is just a different animal, completely different. It's 7 days long. You're sleep deprived, you're food deprived. There's no food around, there's no time for you to really rest in there. At least not, I didn't. Maybe I did. That was one of the things I did wrong. There were so many things that I just experience would have helped with. I just didn't have.
Sure, but that maturity to say, hey, I'm a first-time athlete, and this is a game that, people that are much older than me are dominating. And like you said, you haven't grown into the athletic build that you need yet. And just to say that, I think shows a lot of maturity. What went into making that decision creating that thought process? And thinking that way before you went in the games?
Just being rational, really.
It's funny how common sense goes a long way.
If you look at just my performances of any other event, whether it be the Open or regionals, I hadn't in the Open. I was 32nd or 34th in the world, somewhere around there. So very far from number one in the grand scheme of things. In a field of 40, number 34 is towards the very end. At regionals, I was number 3, and those were people who hadn't cracked the top 10 at the games, and so they were still beating me. So there was no rational reason for me to think that I could go in and beat Matthew Frazier or Ben Smith or Scott Panchik or Brent Fikowski or any of those names that have been in that top 1 through 10. I did think that maybe I would have a chance to go top 20, but like I've said, I made a lot of mistakes going into the games, both mental, physical, just all around. Wasn't prepared like I should have been.
Sure. And you live and you learn, right? But
exactly.
So I'm looking at your CrossFit Games profile right now, and in 2016, you were 338th place in the U.S. 2017 comes along, you're 80th. And then in 2018, you're 24th. That was the year that you went to the games.
Yes.
And 2019, anyone, if you look at these trends, they would think, you're top 10, top 15, but you decided not to compete that year.
Right.
And the reason for that is grad school.
Right.
So let's maybe we could rewind a little bit and talk about your academic side and that career that we kind of brushed through and passed up on a little bit. So you decided to come to Houston, and you're doing your grad school at MD Anderson.
Right.
And for those that might not know, MD Anderson is in the Texas Medical Center, the largest medical center in the world. And so you're in the hub of medicine.
Yeah.
At one of the best medical physics programs in the nation.
Right.
And let's start with this before we go into all the details. For those that might not know, what is medical physics?
So I like to try to explain medical physics. So what we try to study and understand is, number one, on an atomic level, how radiation is created, how a nucleus or electrons orbiting an atom, how they can break down, create radiation, whether it be, gamma, beta, alphas, different things like that, different types of radiation, different energies, how they interact on a biological level with tissues, on a cellular level, and then on a chemical level with DNA, ultimately leading to the destruction of cells or mutation of cells, being cancer. So that's what we try to understand, how radiation affects humans on a cellular level. What we study additionally can be broken down into 3 different subgroups, which is therapy, imaging, and nuclear medicine. Therapy is what a therapist would try to do is develop a treatment plan to attack a tumor or multiple tumors located inside your body. So they would usually determine the type of energy, the energy, the type of radiation, whether it be like an electron, a photon, or a proton, because those interact differently in the body based off of their physical aspects. And then they'll try to create a plan of different, beam sizes, beam angles, things like that. There's a lot that goes into creating a conformal plan so that we can give as much radiation dose to a tumor volume while not giving radiation to the healthy tissue surrounding that tumor volume. Because we don't want that. We don't want to give radiation to the healthy parts of the body, but because we're trying to kill a tumor. And we're using radiation to do that. So we know radiation kills cells, and we don't want to kill the healthy cells. We want to kill all the tumor cells. Anyway, so that's therapy. Imaging studies how radiation can be utilized to create an image. So anytime you've had like a general radiograph, like an X-ray, a fluoro unit, a CT, MRI, ultrasound, all those things use different types of radiation to create an image of the body. And so we use those images to diagnose disease. And then nuclear medicine is a kind of a combination of chemistry and physics, in that a lot of what they do is binding radioactive isotopes to chemicals or molecules that are taken up metabolically by the body, whether it be things that may be taken up by bone, so you can do a bone scan, or things that are taken up by active tissues in the body, whether it be, muscles, your liver, your kidneys, things of that nature. But when I say metabolically active and we think of cancer, cancers are metabolically active. So they will take up things that are labeled to like a glucose. And you can image the radiation.
So glucose causes cancer?
No. We label the glucose with a radioactive isotope because the cancer eats a lot of glucose. And so the glucose labeled with the radioactive isotopes is accumulating in that tumor. We can image the radiation being emitted from that tumor. And so you inject someone with this radioactive labeled chemical like glucose or something of that nature. It's taken up all over the body in different amounts. You'll see like hot spots in the liver, hot spots in the kidneys where it's clearing through urine. It'll get taken up into tumors because they're metabolically active. It'll also get taken up a lot in the brain because the brain uses a ton of glucose. And so you can take a huge image of the entire body and you can see all these hot spots in the brain, the liver, the kidneys, and then, what's that in the lungs? It might be a tumor. Otherwise, there shouldn't be any what we call hot spots in that area. So anyway, in short, those are the three different areas of medical physics, therapy, imaging, and nuclear medicine.
And where does your research lie?
My research lies in therapy. My interest lies in imaging and nuclear medicine.
Yeah, I was joking around earlier about glucose causing cancer. That's something that I'm super fascinated by. And one of the reasons why I'm in keto, and we actually talked about this with an episode with Dr. Ryan Lowry. But I think that concept is something that Dr. Dom D'Agostino, I hope I'm saying his name right, but he's out of Florida, and he's very well known for that. But my friends give me a lot of crap because I throw that around a lot, like glucose causes cancer, and it's just kind of a joke because we don't know, but there's some some indications of it. But to some degree, what you're talking about, right, is like the glucose. The cancer cells can use glucose.
They use it a lot.
Right.
Which is why, whenever my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer, my brother pulled out, this was before I was studying medical physics. So I knew very little about cancer. My brother was like, dude, you have to stop eating sugar. The cancer is just going to eat it up and grow. Right. You need to all low, but it's a low GI index. So we're like all veggies and lean meats and or high fats and things like that, like no sugar. But cancer just eats up sugar. And it also, sugar additionally, I don't know enough, but it definitely plays a lot in your hormone levels. You're spiking insulin and things like that. And hormone levels can have a huge effect on how cancer develops or doesn't develop. There's a lot that goes into that. It's extremely complicated. And I don't fully understand it either. But I could see how sugar may be a leading thing, maybe associated with.
Sure. It's a glycemic index. That's what we're looking for. I can't believe I blanked on that. I talk about that all the time. So anyway, you're in grad school. That's a very time intensive program. Mm-hmm. And with that, you're balancing CrossFit. And not just balancing CrossFit, you're actually competing at the highest level. You're at one of the best in the world. Mm-hmm. How did you balance that? Is there what went into your mentality as you knew that you're gonna have to balance a lot on your plate?
So one of the things I try to keep in mind is an idea of sacrifice. Some people don't like to call it sacrifice. That's what I call it. Sacrificing what I want to do now for what will pay off in the long run. And so that meant sacrificing, sleeping in, sacrificing foods that I wanted, sacrifice time with friends in late nights. I didn't drink, didn't go out to bars or anything. Sacrificing family time. There were a lot of weekends where I wouldn't travel back to Baton Rouge to see my family whenever I had the free time from school, but I was training. And so it was anything that wasn't really directly correlated with the progression of both academics and my fitness when I was being competitive, I tried not to indulge in. And certainly there is some leeway because if you just are, for me, if I was just too regimented and strict with it, you might drive yourself crazy. But for the most part, you try to cut anything that doesn't progress your goals forward, cut it out. You don't do it.
Yeah. So what you're basically talking about is this concept of discipline,
Right.
right? I think a lot of people know that they need to sacrifice certain aspects of their life, but being disciplined in that is very difficult.
Right.
So for you, you talked about, I gave in a few times, but I knew my limits. How did you approach this, just tackling discipline and being disciplined?
That's a good question. So tackling, so I guess what you're saying is, people know they have to make sacrifice. The discipline comes in making the sacrifice, actually going through with it, right?
But doing it is very difficult for a lot of people.
Right.
Being disciplined is very difficult for a lot of people. So there's something in your mental construct that's different.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Fear.
Fear of failure?
Yes, absolutely. I think fear is a great motivator, and I am terrified of failing. And I think a lot of it comes from a fear of disappointing my dad, actually. And I've had this conversation with people before because they wanted to know what drives me. And I started digging into it, what really drives me? Why do I wake up at 5 a.m. every day to go work out? Why do I try to watch what I eat? Why do I not drink alcohol? Why did I neglect time with my loved ones? Why did I do all these things? It's because I wanted to make my dad proud. I wanted so bad to not let him down that I was willing to sacrifice so many other things.
So when you dived into your own psyche to realize that, what did that look like? Because most people don't know that about themselves.
Yeah.
They don't know what their greatest fear is.
Yeah.
I had a friend say, I can tell a lot about a man based on what I think his greatest fear is. And for you to know that, that's powerful. So how did you do that?
I don't know. It may have been through just conversation with people, constant inward reflection. I mean, I know earlier today at dinner, you and I were talking about prayer, and I see prayer as a form of reflection.
Yeah, meditation, you said.
Or sorry, as a form of meditation. And so I think they're very similar. But I do a good deal of praying, and a lot of times I'm praying to just not fail. And I don't know where along the lines I figured out, or I think it's because I'm just so afraid of upsetting, my dad. But that and conversation with other people who are a lot wiser and mature than I am. A lot of my friends are much older, but they all have a lot more life experience than I have. And they're very good friends who I may have very well have been through just conversation with them about what drives me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how I
really appreciate you talking about that, because that's very honest from you. And, most people, first of all, they don't know it. And then second of all, they don't share it. So, thank you. And as we're talking about some of the toughest things you faced, one of the times this happened was this past year, right? So we were talking over at dinner, and, you basically I'll let you describe it. Yeah. So what was happening around the time that you were going through the CrossFit Games? Yeah.
So first off, you and I are both young. A lot of the people that you interview are fairly young as well, right? I haven't had any incredible challenges in my life, and I've been very blessed. I have had challenging times, but I know for a fact that it's not the worst that it will be. And so I try to keep that in mind whenever I describe, my challenging times, because if I describe this to someone out there has gone through something way worse and dealt with it. But yeah.
Yeah, but let me pause on that though, because if you were to talk to an average person and say, what's the most challenging thing, they'd answer it right away. For you to even recognize that what you're going through is not the worst that could happen, that says a lot about you. So anyway, I don't want you to cut yourself short about that, so keep going.
There are a lot of people who go through far worse, and I know mine's just coming. At some point, it's going to be here. So, but yeah, so I qualified for the games in May last year. So my training volume picked up tremendously, and my dedication and just thinking about it all day picked up more, because I was always it was a huge dream of mine. So I wanted to do well at doing it. So, I was training 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. every single day, which meant waking up at 5 to get to the gym and get warm and whatever. I was taking full-time classes, summer classes at MD Anderson. I was taking proton therapy and radiation protection.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to do that.
And I started my research job with one of our professors. So that was another full-time job. And then I was studying for the board exams, which I was going to be taking a week after the CrossFit Games along with my 2 finals for school. So in that 3-month period, May, June, July, and then the first week of August, I was full-time classes, full-time training, full-time research, and studying for board exams, which basically in my mind determined whether or not I would be able to progress on to the next step of my career, which was getting into a residency. So yeah, those 3 months were some of the most stressful and fearful months that I've had so far.
Yeah. And you described how would you describe your performance at the end? Yeah. From your CrossFit Games perspective, your boards, your finals.
So yeah, you and I were talking about it. I poured so much time into each one of those aspects. As far as training is concerned, I was training, 4 or 5 hours a day, an hour in the morning, or maybe a little more, multiple hours in the evening, basically until it got dark and the gym closed. I was coming straight home, eating and going straight to bed. After working out, I would go to class. I would go to a research job after that. In any free time in there, I was trying to study for the board exams. And I poured a lot of time in each one of those things. At the end of this period, I competed at the games. I came in like 3rd to last, which is not what I wanted at all. I mean, I'm with the top 40 fittest men in the world, but you're comparing yourself to the field, and to come in 3rd to last is nothing to write home about, I guess. I did well in my classes. I did fine with that. As far as boards are concerned, I failed half of my board exams. So there was 2 halves of it. I failed half. So that was a huge blow to me. And so to me, I had failed in what I was trying to accomplish. I wanted to do well at the games, and I didn't reach my goals. I wanted to pass my boards, and I didn't pass. And so everything I had done that summer culminated in a failure. And so that's whenever I decided to quit competing in CrossFit, which we touched on a while back, and now we're coming to why. I had spread myself so thin, and I always said that CrossFit would never come before school, but it was coming before school. It was coming before family, and I failed at it. It caused me. Go ahead.
The only thing you wanted, the only thing you dreamed of, you said earlier that the thing that you dreamed of was being in the games and winning it. But it seems like the only thing that you dreamed of more than that was being a medical physicist and following in your father's footsteps.
Right. Absolutely. And you don't always dream about academic access or success. There's no podium whenever you graduate. There's no 1, 2, 3. There's no huge crowd cheering you. I guess actually maybe that's not so true, but for me, there's no huge crowd cheering me on every time I go take a test or something, or whenever I graduate. And so these were all things like I'd fantasize in my head to be able to compete at the CrossFit Games. I don't fantasize about school. I fantasize about the end product of school, which is having a career that sets me up for financial success and things that come with that. But CrossFit was never going to make me a lot of money. I was never going to be the best in the world. I was never going to do it for years upon years. It was always just a hobby that I really loved and I got really competitive in. And I wasn't willing to let school get away from me because there was so much more I wanted to do with school. And I knew that what I did in school now is going to affect how I do whenever I'm 65, still a medical physicist.
Yeah, I think one concept that I'm a big fan of is playing the long game.
Right.
And you're in such a unique position because you have this thing that you're so good at, one of the best at in the world. And that brings so much gratification, But we talked about this, being a CrossFit athlete and being able to live off of that lifestyle is very difficult.
Right.
And you said, you know what? I know what my priorities are, and I know where my long game is going to be in, and I'm going to make that a priority because if I can't do both of these, I'm going to pick the one that is for that long game. And as we talk about sacrifice, I think that is the epitome of it, right? It's like you sacrifice not for the short-term gratification, but for the long-term.
Right.
So that's very mature of you.
I appreciate that.
I'm very curious. One thing I want to talk about on this podcast more of is that I talk about people being really successful, you doing really well at the games and all these things, even though you may not describe yourself doing that well, right?
Right.
But,
it's all perspective.
But still, you're one of the fittest in the world. And I got to ask, even though you feel like you may quote unquote failed in that, if you could go back and do it all over again, what would you do?
I would have studied harder for the boards.
Would you have competed in the games again? Or would you have competed in the games?
Yes. But
you wouldn't have made it a priority.
I would have, I don't know. I would have studied harder for the boards because that caused me more stress. I got stomach ulcers from failing. I swear, like a month after getting my results back from the boards, I had stomach ulcers for like another month.
Yeah, and ulcers are typically caused by
stress induced.
Yep.
Yeah. Like in the grand scheme of things, the games was an incredible experience, but that's it. It was an experience. It didn't get me into residency. I don't think. I put it on my CV, but I don't think it got me into residency. It didn't get me a GPA, and it's not going to get me the job after I'm done with residency. How I do in school is going to get me those long-term goals. The goals that are going to pay for my kids to go to school, pay for my cars, pay my house note. Those are the goals that really matter, not the 1 week that I was in Madison competing at the games.
The thing is that you still compete. You might not compete, to the level that you did, but you're still out there doing CrossFit every day because it's still something you love.
Right. I'll never stop exercising.
Yeah. And I love that. So let's return a little bit to the CrossFit side of you, right? Because it's still there. You're still, you still have a very similar lifestyle, in my opinion, as though you were a CrossFit athlete. You're not spending that many hours in it, but you still live very similarly, it seems like.
Right.
So, and part of that, a big part of that is your diet, right? One thing that I firmly believe is that most people believe that, that if you take the 80-20 principle, so basically this concept that you put in 20% of some input and at least 80% of output.
Right.
Most people believe that if I work out, then that amount of time that I work out will determine the 80% of my well-being, my health. But in reality, it's the diet. The diet is the 20% that leads to the 80% of output of the results that you want.
For sure.
And that's just something that I just feel like a lot of people maybe might not see, right?
Yeah.
So I really want to focus on diet. So what does diet look like for you? When you go through, you're sponsored by a company that makes your foods, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have I call it ambassadorship more so, but I get free meals from a place called Vital Kitchen, who's basically organic, super healthy, super fresh meal caterer, I guess, meal prep, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, in Houston, Texas. And their food's phenomenal. And so it's like tons of veggies in every meal and good, clean proteins. And they have vegetarian options, things like that. Before that...
Keto too?
What's that?
Keto too?
I feel like some of their meals are keto. I don't know enough about keto, but a lot of they're very veggie dense. Like the carbohydrates come from veggies. It's not loaded with like rice or grains or things. It's vegetables. And I know with keto you're allowed like some amount of carbohydrates per day.
It's okay. It's easy to make anything keto. You just throw some olive oil in there and then it becomes high fat. As long as it's low carb, you can make anything high fat.
Yeah. So their food's pretty low carb. But in general, the diet is for me is a ton of carbohydrates, and I try to keep those carbohydrates like pretty clean. I eat a lot of fruit, a lot of rice, which is it's just convenient for me. Potatoes,
a little high on the glycemic scale,
right? But The convenience for me pays off.
Right. And you probably need the quick energy too, right?
You know, my fiance is her dad's from Taiwan, so we all eat rice. Yeah, so clean proteins as well. You know, high quality meats or porks or chickens and fish like salmon and tuna. Lots of veggies, and so. But all that kind of stuff takes planning and preparation. So every Sunday is a trip to the grocery store and then several hours of cooking and preparing the things for the week. And you mentioned the 80-20, and you mentioned a different aspect of it. I kind of apply it in my diet a different way in that 80% of the time I eat very well. And then, 20% or so I indulge. And so, every night I'll have a couple Girl Scout cookies. I am guilty of that, but
I feel like for how much you're working out, you can afford the
yeah. I mean, if I eat too clean, I lose too much weight. Actually,
it's hard to keep up.
It is.
Yeah.
And so, what worked for me, getting my diet in check really well for CrossFit and making sure I was eating enough, but also staying lean, was through macro counting.
Yeah.
And so I did that kind of solo for a little bit, figured out how many calories I needed on the internet and how many to come from carbohydrates, proteins, and fats.
You're very disciplined with that.
And I was very disciplined for a long time. And then it really turned into like knowing how to balance a meal.
Yeah.
And
that's the best part about macro counting is you do it for like a week and you basically have the numbers in your head and you can just start eating food and it's not even like you have like a unconscious ticker in your brain and it's just kind of just like, I'm at like 2,000 now and I need another 1,000 to go before I have to go to sleep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then although with that can get kind of tricky because, I'll do that and then, a month down the line, I'm like, man, I'm feeling like kind of sluggish or like something feels off. I mean, maybe I don't look as good as I thought, like as lean and like, as bodybuilders call it dry, right, as I expect. And I was like, I'll track my food for a few days. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm not really eating how I should have. And I'm eating like, 20 more grams of fat and I'm going way over on my total calories or I'm under eating and my metabolism's completely shutting down. That was, what happened to me fairly recently. After I decided to quit competing, I pretty much stopped eating. I lost like 12 pounds.
Shucks.
And I've gained some of that back, but I just like kind of stopped eating. I was like, whatever. I'm not competing. Who cares what I like eat?
Right. You can just kind of have fun with it now.
Yeah. And then I lost a bunch of weight. I was like, oops. And so it helps me in that aspect of like, whenever I get away from it and I stop getting so conscious, I start tracking again and get conscious again. So.
Yeah. What does breakfast look like?
Right now, I've been eating the same breakfast every day for maybe like a month or more. I'll do a bagel, Dave's Killer Bagels. Either
a little bit healthier.
Yeah, any one of the flavors. I don't care. Right now, it's blueberry. I'll do some coconut oil in a pan and kind of saute some broccoli, slaw, and spinach, and then pour in a bunch of egg whites. I don't measure it. I just kind of ballpark it, throw in some seasoning with that. And then I'll do a bowl of non-fat Greek yogurt and berries, whether it be raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, whatever. And so that with a cup of coffee that has some sugar and heavy whipping cream. Probably too much sugar. I like sweet coffee. I have a sweet tooth.
Any particular seasoning or coffee that you prefer?
Yeah, so we use a local roaster here in Houston.
Gotcha.
House of Coffee Beans. We have the vanilla nut cream. It is phenomenal. Really good coffee. Also, there's a coffee shop. Really close. Anyway, I'm not going to promote people. Anyway, Houston's a cool city. Got some good coffee.
Any seasoning that you prefer?
Seasoning for egg whites, I just do. It's like I don't even know what it's called, but it's garlic, rosemary, and sea salt. I really like it with my eggs, so it's good. I'm
gonna have to check that out before I head out of here.
For sure.
Yeah. What about supplements?
Supplements?
Are there any that you like? You like? Let's say you can only have one supplement to take. What are you going to take?
Creatine.
More than protein? More than whey?
You can eat protein.
Right.
It's hard to eat creatine.
Okay, so how do you take your creatine?
I take it at night before bed. So I drink a fiber drink that I put a couple of scoops of creatine into right before I go to sleep.
And do you cycle your creatine?
Nope. Maybe I should, but I don't. But So I took it for like just straight, and you can do that as far as I understand. Like you don't have to cycle off a creatine. It doesn't have the effect on your kidneys that people thought it did, or whatever. After I quit competing, I stopped taking creatine. Got really unstrong, lost 12 pounds, and then I decided I kind of maybe I wanted to keep training the way I had been training, even if it doesn't mean competing, because I loved the lifestyle that I had. I loved being healthy. I loved being strong. I loved being good at CrossFit. So I started, lifting heavy again and things like that, and also taking creatine. Now, I didn't stop lifting whenever I stopped competing. I just didn't put the effort into training that I did. But I started taking creatine again, and I'm back up to like 196. And so, which is about where I was at the games. And so creatine, I think, is very important, at least to me.
So what are some other things that are included in your supplements list?
Lots of vitamins, lots. So I take a multi, zinc, melatonin before bed, magnesium.
You take melatonin every day before bed?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Multivitamins?
No, melatonin.
Melatonin? Yeah. So I did like a little self-study with that. I used to have a watch. You do it with a Fitbit or a Whoop bracelet. Sure. They'll track your sleep cycles. They'll tell you how much you moved at night, how much you were awake when you were in REM, when you weren't. And these are all estimates. They're probably not really accurate. But I was in bed for like 8.5 hours, 9 hours every night, and I was sleeping like 7 hours. So I was awake like 2 to 2.5 hours. Started taking melatonin, and even though it gives me really lucid dreams and I sleepwalk, I was sleeping like 8.5 hours of the night.
I'm hallucinating at night. It's okay.
I've always had that problem, and melatonin just exacerbates it. I don't know why, but it gives me really lucid dreams. But I was sleeping 8.5 hours of the 9 hours I was in bed. I was getting an extra hour and a half sleep. And the only thing I had changed was the melatonin, and these are like all.
So when you
averages.
cycled off melatonin, did you feel like you needed to have it back?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, I still fell asleep fine.
I'm sure it's like a small dose every day kind of thing.
Yeah, I just take, I don't know how many milligrams it is, but,
Sure.
And what else I also tried doing, or recently, so I sleepwalk really bad. Like I have like these lucid dreams that I wake up and I see my dreams in my room wherever I am, and I'll get up and like run out of my room and shit. It's weird. I hate it. But I started wearing.
Is it the pre-workout?
I don't know what it is, man.
Do you take pre-workout?
No, I drink coffee.
Okay, gotcha. So it's not the pre-workout. It's not C4 or anything. Okay.
No. I started wearing blue blocking glasses at night. I have them on my bedside table over here, and I haven't been sleepwalking nearly as much as I used to.
Wow.
And I don't. And I had no expectations.
Not trying to make any causations here, but
yeah. I have no idea if that's what it is, but I have not been sleepwalking nearly as much as I used to.
Yeah, big believer in
blue block glasses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe there's a thing there.
Yeah, so I'm really fascinated by sleep as well because, that's your time of recovery, but most of us probably don't get enough of it, right? Mm-hmm. How much do you typically sleep in a night?
I usually like lights out at 9:30, and I'm up at the latest 6 usually. So even then, it's barely over 8 hours.
Probably helps when you grow up without any cable, so that you don't have a reason to like, I don't have any urge to watch this game that's going on till like 11.
It's a side product of too many 4 a.m. mornings.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. So, have you done anything to maximize your sleep apart from the melatonin and the blue light blockers?
A good mattress helps a lot. That makes a huge difference if you can do that for yourself. A good mattress, and then temperature. For all those out there, I have a single bedroom apartment, so electricity is not outrageous, but I put my thermostat on 64 at night.
Oh wow!
So I crank it way down.
I would be freezing.
Yeah, but dude, I swear, if it's 67, I'll wake up sweating. I swear.
Wow. So you have like your point, like your ideal temperature point set.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah, I mean it's 67 in here right now. So it'll be 64 by the time I go to sleep.
Yeah. I love what you're talking about because you basically did this through self-experimentation, and you kind of have your ideal set points for all these things, even your melatonin doses.
Right.
Yeah. There's two things I want to touch upon before we close our conversation. Mm-hmm. One of them is something that you believe in, and that's surrounding yourself with people that are just as ambitious or as driven and have the same why as you.
Absolutely.
How's that worked out in your life, and how do you strive to find those people, and where do you find them?
Yeah. So if you want an example, I was in high school. I was not a good student. My friends were incredibly intelligent, but they did not study for crap. And I don't mind saying that because they did just fine in high school. They had like 4.0s or whatever. I, on the other hand, if I didn't study, I didn't do well, and I didn't. I had a very poor GPA, B's and A's and B's, not terrible, but not up to par, not what my friends had, because I emulated my friends in high school. Fast forward to college, I'm friends with a gentleman named Simon Lorenzo and Dylan Otia, both incredibly intelligent, but also worked incredibly hard. I studied with them legitimately every week in undergrad. And without them, I wouldn't have finished my degree in physics because I would have been lost. Those are the people they teach you how to do things, because they're better at they're smarter than I am, and they were doing better in school. So I'm gonna study with them and see what they're doing. We would study all Saturday in a room with a whiteboard doing physics problems, rewriting equations, redoing problems until I understood exactly what I was doing and why I was doing it. And so that's a great example. Fast forward to CrossFit, I didn't become really what I call really good until I met Alexis Johnson, because she had just qualified for the games, and I started training with her before she went to her first games that she had qualified for. She showed me how to do everything. She showed me that it required a ton of commitment in diet, in sleep, and recovery, and then just effort, just pure willingness to suffer in a workout. She used to make fun of me because we would start a workout and she would be going so hard compared to what I was doing. I would be talking to her and she would not respond at all in the middle of a workout because she couldn't breathe. And then after, she'd be like, "Why the hell are you talking? You shouldn't be able to have enough oxygen to talk." And I was like, I'm probably not going hard enough. And people, surrounding yourself with people who are better than you are going to be the ones who show you how to do what you want to do. And so in any aspect of any goal you set, surround yourself with people who've already done it, who have already become great students, who have already become great athletes, who have already started their own business. How did they do it? Do that.
So basically just listen to all the episodes of the Yash and Company podcast, right?
Exactly. Listen to every single... No, you're interviewing all these incredible minds, all these incredible work ethics and their tactics, and maybe my tactics of waking up at 5 a.m. and going to bed at 9:30 don't work for you. But someone else's, who's just as successful, has a completely different lifestyle. They're probably following some of the same guidelines, but attacking it different. And so you can pull from those things of wisdom. My brother and my dad will tell you I'm incredibly hard-headed and I don't listen to a darn thing that they ever say, until they told me that. And I was like, you know what, you're right. I don't ever listen. And so I started listening. They've done it. They've had these experiences. They're telling me how to do it. So you try to listen to what other people have done. You don't have to rewrite everything.
Yeah. It's nice listening to people and hearing what they have to say and following that. But it's definitely something else to put yourself with people that are doing what you want to do, that are better at you than it, and then just following them, and just I feel like you'll get better,
right?
Just through osmosis, right?
Exactly.
So there's something else that you said that I'd be remiss not to touch up on, and that's this concept that everything you have wasn't really by yourself, right? And that's something that I think about a lot, because when you think about this quote about it takes a village to raise a child, I 100% believe in that, because there could be so many different things that I've done that could have gone differently. There's so many different people in my life that have played a role in that. And it seems like you recognize that, and that's something that you firmly believe in.
Absolutely. Yeah. I believe I may have said, I don't believe in self-made men, more or less. And, a little bit more of what you had said, but I don't think that there's a person out there who became incredibly successful completely by their own efforts. Yes, they're very hard workers and they did a lot of it by themselves. Like no one read the book and no one took me to school to study with my, classmates. I did that, but they're the ones who taught me this shit. It takes so much effort of other people. It took so much effort from other people into me to make me good. in school, Dylan and Simon, in my life, just like my parents put so much effort into making sure that I have what I need to do what I need to do. My fiance, who whenever I was competing and still does, would cook meals, would do laundry, would keep everything clean, would take care of the dog, would make sure that I was able to do what I needed to do in order to attain my goal. And that was completely selfish because she didn't get anything out of it, In CrossFit, Alexis and Travis, they did a lot to make sure that I was doing what I needed to do and give me advice. And so for anyone to say, I did this only by my hard work, I think they're full of crap.
For sure. I think it's so wise of you to have that understanding. But as I reflect on your story, there is a lot of, and you're cutting yourself short almost a little bit by saying that, because there is a lot that you have done to become the person you are today, right? You still have worked hard and took advantage of those opportunities, and that's what we have to do at the end of the day.
Right.
And I'm so inspired by your story because you have, at the end of the day, it's a story of grit. It's a story of having opportunities and working at them as hard as you can, and not being the smartest person in the room or the one with the most natural talent,
Absolutely.
but doing it at the best of your ability, and has led to what I believe, at least from hearing your story, to where you are. And so for that, I'm very inspired.
I appreciate that.
And even beyond that, just the maturity to say that, CrossFit was great, but I'm gonna go to grad school and I'm gonna go to my residency. I'm gonna take care of that.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that thinks that he might be back in the games.
We'll see.
But maybe that's just me. But Brandon, I'm rooting for you. Hope to see you at the games one day. But it's been a pleasure having this conversation. Thanks for being here and making time for this.
Thank you so much. It's been quite a blast.
If you like what you heard on the Yash and Company podcast, go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Yash and Company. If you check out our website at yashandco.com, we'll actually mail you a free sticker if you subscribe. But until next Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen, this is Yash signing out.